Hey Corrie, nice to meet you.
Hey, nice to meet you too.
So Corrie, tell us about yourself.
I'm an interpretation officer at the Canada Science and Technology Museum in Ottawa, where I design fun STEAM programs for learners of all ages. If you visit the museum, we have a whole exhibit based on illusions of all types that involve hearing, smell, and my favorite, optical illusions. But we also have a ton of content that you can find on our website too, like experiments and educational tools.
That's so interesting. But what is an optical illusion anyway?
I'm glad you asked. I happen to have an example of an optical illusion right here made by Professor of Psychology Akiyoshi Kitaoka in 2003. Take a close look. Does this picture look like it's moving to you? Believe it or not, this is a still picture. Nothing about it is actually moving. And I can prove it. Focus really hard on the center of one of the circles. Does the motion stop?
Whoa.
With this optical illusion, like most optical illusions, your brain is tricked by the information that your senses are giving it. And we start seeing things that may or may not be there in reality. Illusions always try to throw off the senses and change the way that we perceive things.
How is it possible that our brains get tricked so easily?
Don't worry, your brain is right most of the time. But our brains take up a lot of resources to run, so they've evolved to be more efficient and save energy, making them really good at quickly interpreting the world around us. Our brain is always trying to find meaning in the information we receive and make assumptions based on past experiences as a way to survive and keep us out of harm's way. For example, if we see a dark spot on the ground, much darker than the rest of the ground around it, our brain might interpret this as a hole that could injure us if we stepped into it. So it's been very important for our brains to make these quick assumptions, but sometimes these assumptions can fool us too. So take a look at this picture made by psychologist Tom Cornsweet in the 1960s. If I were to ask which square was darker, A or B, what would you say? As it turns out, A and B are actually the same color. So why does one appear darker than the other? Our brain loves patterns, so our brain is convinced that the color pattern on this checkerboard alternates like all other checkerboards we've ever encountered. Similarly, our brain understands that shadows make things darker, and the squares around B have become much darker in the shadow. Between these two preconceptions, our brains are fooled into interpreting this picture like any other 3D scenario instead of seeing what's actually there.
Brains are so weird. So Corrie, what's one of your favorite optical illusions?
One of my favorite optical illusions is the blind spot illusion. And you can do this at home too. Take out a piece of paper and draw an X on the left side and a dot on the right side. Focus on the X and notice that in your peripheral vision, which is what you can see to either side of what you're focusing on, you can still see the dot. Now slowly move your head away from the paper and you'll notice that the dot disappears.
Whoa.
What happened? Well, you've just discovered your blind spot. Inside the curve of our eyes is a surface called the retina, which has many tiny little light receptors responsible for giving us vision. The way our brain gets the visual information from the retina is through a nerve called the optic nerve. The optic nerve travels from the retina to the brain, and in the space where the nerve is, there are no light receptors, so we don't get any visual information from this area. In other words, there's a blind spot.
Cool.
What's interesting about this optical illusion is that even though the dot disappears from our peripheral vision, the brain automatically fills in the gap with whichever colors or textures appeared around the dot. There's no dark hole where we lose our vision.
Do we use optical illusions in movies and TV?
Well, animated movies and cartoons use optical illusions to trick our brains into thinking we're seeing movement instead of a bunch of still pictures shown to us one after another really fast. This is called persistence of vision, and it works because once our eyes see an image, our brain holds that image in our mind for a few seconds, long enough for our brain to put the whole picture together. Our brain can process a dozen or so images per second, so when we're shown several images one after another, like in cartoons and movies, it creates the illusion of continuity, and our brains can be tricked into thinking the images on screen are moving or animated.
That's pretty cool. What's the coolest thing you do in your career?
Well, working at the Science and Technology Museum and being in a role where I can inspire the next generation of scientists is by far the coolest thing that I get to do.
What is some advice you would give to young women like me who are interested in STEAM?
Follow your dreams. We need more young women in STEAM, so take your math classes, take your science classes, get involved in clubs and programs or activities that focus on your interests. Don't be afraid to go where no man has gone before.
Thank you so much, Corrie. You taught us so much about the brain, optical illusions, and so much more.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great talking with you guys. Bye!
See ya!